Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. My name is Dean Jones, the Well Seasoned Librarian. Today I'm talking to Christopher Shaffer, who is the author of Moon over Sasova, One American's Experience Teaching in Post-Cold War Slovakia. Christopher is a Dean of Library Services at Troy University and a former history teacher. He taught in Slovakia in the first months of it becoming an independent nation in 1993, and also returned there for another teaching stint in 1996. I had a really great time talking to Christopher and getting to know him. I feel like I've known him forever, and it's just been wonderful getting a chance to talk to him about the book. Moon over Sasova is a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it thoroughly, and I chuckled throughout the whole thing from many of Christopher's witty anecdotes about his time there. Without further ado, I'm going to go right to the conversation. I know you'll enjoy it as much as I had doing it. And on we go. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. Today, I'm very happy to have fellow librarian Christopher Shaffer on the program talking about his book, Moon over Sasova, One American's Experience Teaching in Post-Cold War Slovakia. Christopher, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I think we could probably digress and have an entire conversation of the difficulties of being a librarian during the pandemic, but we won't go into that.
Well, it's a good time to write.
Yeah, I think so.
Different opportunities.
Now, for our guests that are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a recovering teacher. I taught middle and high school for about 8 years. And I've been a librarian for the last 17 almost. I started as a reference librarian and then went into administration. And I twice have taught English as a second language in Eastern Europe and Slovakia. And that's the topic of Moon over Sasova.
Now, I really enjoyed Moon over Sasova. It was such a great book. And I think I was telling you earlier, I chuckled a lot through it. It has a lot of really fun anecdotes. The whole feel of the book is informative and fun, but there's some really good points where your sense of humor really shines through, and it really is very entertaining. Now, you, like me, grew up, kind of towards the end of the Cold War. And I know I was affected by it. I think if anybody grew up with the duck and cover things when we were kids and all that, it sticks with you. How did you come to study this period, and how did you get to go study abroad in 1991 with the Education for Democracy group?
Well, like you say, I did grow up with, the threat of the Soviet Union. We didn't have duck and cover drills when I was in elementary school, but I did go to a parochial school, a Catholic school, and it was just stridently anti-communism.
Yeah.
And, as you would, imagine, the whole atheism thing bothered them
yeah.
a little bit. Yeah. And so I had this image of what a communist place looked like. And so all of that was kind of in the background. And in 1991, I had a quarter to go and I'd be finished at Auburn. And I'd been taking German classes, and I could complete a minor in German if I did their abroad program in Mannheim, Germany. So I signed up for that. It was a great deal. It was like $300 more to go to Germany than to stay in Auburn in the summer. And on a weekend trip, I went to Prague, and just a beautiful city. Fell in love with it. I mean, it's got Gothic architecture, Baroque architecture all over the place, and I had a friend who said, he felt like he was in the middle of a really big Batman movie. And
I like that. So, that's a good imagery. That's good.
So that'd be the Gothic part, I guess.
Yeah.
And anyway, on a return visit, when I was backpacking after the classes were over, I just found a sign on a pole that said, "You want to come teach in Czechoslovakia?" And so I tore off a number, and that's how I ended up over there.
Now, you ended up getting to go and live in what is you wrote as Banska Bystrica. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
It's a soft C. It's Banska Bystrica.
Banska Bystrica. Now, how would you describe it for people who have not been there?
It was this just beautiful medieval city. And so mid 1300s. So again, Gothic architecture. It had been a copper mining town. It was the Thugger family, which I'm sure I just destroyed that pronunciation. Um, so I'm sure there was an umlaut involved, probably Thugger. So anyway, it was a wealthy town and it looked like it. And when I got there, uh, it was just so beautiful, but it was funny, the joy of communism. If you looked beyond the facades, then you understood what people had been going through, because the facades of the buildings looked great, but they were kind of crumbling behind those. And when I went back in 96 and then especially in 2007, that was really interesting to see all of the improvements. And they had brought these buildings back to fantastic conditions. And it was more than just facade.
Now, I was surprised to find out when you arrived in Slovakia, there had only been an independence for 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Well, you have the Velvet Revolution,
Right.
which was October of '89, and so Czechoslovakia became independent.
Yeah.
And then you had the Velvet Divorce, which went into effect January 1st of '93. And I got there on the 14th. This was with the Velvet Divorce, the Czech and Slovak republics separated from each other.
Now, how was that to come into a country that has been going through this? That must have been kind of surreal to see all this. Were the people quite stirred up by this, or what was the
That's
attitude?
what you would think.
Right.
And it was just so funny because it was, everybody was really kind of like me. You know, I mean,
Wow.
No one was all that excited about it. I mean, it was a brokered deal in Parliament, and they wanted to go their own way. It also, they had hoped to have some kind of big event on the Danube River in Bratislava and have a big celebration. And it was one of the coldest winters, I think, ever, even for them. And I mean, they tried to have some celebration, and I was told it was incredibly low key, but I had this image of one Slovak standing on the bank of the Danube with a sparkler, you know, in an overcoat.
Yeah.
But it was
kind of anticlimactic.
It was incredibly cold that winter. I mean, it was just perfect for somebody from the deep south to land in the middle of that.
Now, what was it like teaching the people of Slovakia English and teaching them about the West?
It was a tremendous amount of fun, because I think that's, you know, it's probably why I went back and did it again, because I had none of the difficult parts of teaching to contend with. I didn't have to really make lesson plans. I had a teacher who was doing that, and I was sort of the assistant. So all I had to do was talk to them, answer their questions. They loved figuring out the lyrics to music. I had one kid who was obsessed with REM, I guess, and
Nice.
And nothing against REM at all, but I'd never really listened to their music, and so I couldn't cheat. I had to, I didn't already know the stuff. So anyway, we would go through the lyrics, and sometimes he would be like, "You don't know what they're saying?" And I was like, "Sometimes you just don't. You need the lyric sheets, and I don't have that. No Google."
I mean, I would be hard pressed to make sense of some of Michael Stipe's lyrics, even if I knew. I mean, I know English and I can read it, but I don't always know what they're talking about in the songs. How could you describe that?
And we didn't get into analysis, but you know, it was Man on the Moon was the one that he wanted. I'm going to close out my email, which is dinging at us.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
So and then the one that I taught them, and I think it does sum up American culture, was Jimmy Buffett's Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Nice. I like that. Now, some of the funniest parts of the book were you talking about you and your friend Meryl, fellow teacher, sharing a flat there. And can you tell some of the listeners about that? Because I know you guys had a lot of challenges living in that flat, especially not having refrigeration.
I figured that's where you would go. We didn't have a refrigerator until I want to say it was early April, because it does stay cold there for a long time. And you know, Merrill was, he was from Colorado, and so he was used to cold weather. I mean, this what we end up doing in lieu of a refrigerator and freezer had never occurred to me, because I'd never really been freezing temperatures for more than a day or two. But we started using the balcony
Yeah.
as the cooling system, and the problem was, it just froze everything.
Yeah.
So there was no moderation. So we would get up an hour or so early, or earlier than we normally would, and we'd bring in the milk to thaw, and then you could have cereal and stuff like that. And there actually are worse systems. I mean, it worked surprisingly well. And we'd while we waited, we'd listen to the BBC, and that was our. We had a little transistor radio. That was how we learned about what was going on in the world. And then when it got to about April, the director of the school was still telling me he couldn't get us a refrigerator. These rare creatures. No one had seen one since T-Rex roamed the earth. He just didn't think we were going to get one. And so I told the lady who was my lead teacher, I said, well, translate this for him. Tell him Delta is ready when I am. And she said, he doesn't understand. I said, I'm going to get a ticket and I'm going to leave if he doesn't get me a refrigerator. And when I got home that afternoon, there had been a Christmas miracle, a Festivus miracle, and Merrill was stocking the refrigerator.
I love it. Now, shopping there was kind of interesting for you, from what I've been reading. Alcohol was cheaper than other items. How did this affect the shopping and the kind of eating over there?
Well, for two young guys in their 20s, you can imagine how it affected the shopping. But with Slovakia still had vestiges of communism, and along with that were state price controls.
Yeah.
Now it was for the Slovaks, it was a good thing they had state price controls, because everybody was operating off about $100 a month. And they used Slovak crowns, 3,000 crowns, or 30 crowns to $1. So I got 3,000 a month.
Right.
It was a cash economy. So you would go every 2 weeks to the bursar's office, and they would count out 1,500 crowns in hundreds. And then so to better answer your question, a beer was about 10 or 11 crowns. A liter of milk was 15.
Uh-huh.
And so I do think an inebriated populace is easier to control than a sober one.
Yeah.
But as far as price controls go, it really means you can have a pretty good life overall. I mean, I would say on average, they had a better life than average Americans on the whole, but they couldn't leave the country.
Yeah.
Because again, you leave the country, all you got is $100, and that's, in Vienna, that's barely going to get you a piece of pie.
Yeah.
Cake, actually. So
now,
it was problematic for them.
You have some interesting neighbors and people that you taught over there. I liked your neighbors, Joseph and Lucy. Can you talk about them a bit?
Well, they were, in a way, the odd couple. He was a Serb and she was a Croat, and of course, not that many miles to our south, their two peoples were slaughtering each other, with the Serbs having a bit of an advantage at that time. So, but anyway, they had immigrated back in the 80s, I suppose, and he had gone into construction, immigrated to Toronto, Canada, and he achieved the dream. He made saved a nest egg of $1 million, and then felt the call of the motherland, and decided to go back to Croatia, which, by the way, is one of the most beautiful places on earth. I understand the desire. And where he messed up was he put all his money in Yugoslav banks. And so So keep your money in the West. is if you learn nothing else today, do that. And so anyway, the war starts. They freeze all the accounts. And so he can only get a trickle of money. And they're also drafting everybody.
Right.
And so they've got to get out. And also keep in mind, he would have been a Serb in Croatia.
Right.
So suddenly he's on the wrong side of the line. And he wanted to stay close to his money, and they go north to Slovakia. And I met him one day going up in the elevator, and he was in a very nice Western suit with a tie. And I mean, no one really, I mean, it's sort of a European thing. They're not all that formal. And so I was just curious. We got to talking, and over time we got to be good friends. But he and Lucy, the wife, they would have this low running war sometimes. I mean, you'd have ethnic jads, and I'm like, I don't know.
God.
I don't know if that was a joke. That sounded kind of harsh. Yeah. But he wanted to make all his money back, and so he was always coming up with these money making schemes. And he, for some reason, thought two Americans in their 20s had all this money to invest.
Yeah.
And I guess the best one is we're up there drinking one night, and he says, "Chris, I have proposition for you. We go into import export together, and I have found in Czech Republic these jams. They are wonderful jams. People will love them. They will buy them." And I'm like, Joseph, man, we got Smuckers in the United States. We got jelly too. We got it all. And it goes on and on. He was trying to say gems. And
I love that.
They produce a lot of garnets in the Czech Republic, and beautiful stuff actually. But I didn't really want to go into import export business. And I guess another one of his great moments was he was talking about someone, and says, "Chris, I don't want to offend you, but I am telling you that man, he is a son of a bitch."
I love that. Now, you also began tutoring a boy named Samuel, and I think his mother, Susan, would make lunch for you. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, everybody thought I was going to die. I weighed about 120 pounds, and I'm 6 feet tall. Still 6 feet tall, but I've gained some weight. And
as we all have.
But I did. I look like an AIDS victim. I know it. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. And I just couldn't gain weight. I ate like a pig, and I ate like a big pig over there. But we would often do private tutoring, the Americans. And so I was introduced to Susan, and she asked if I would teach the boy, which was a bit of a stretch. He was a great kid, but he did not speak a word of English. And so all of a sudden, this is real teaching now. This is direct method from hell. And anyway, she sizes me up after we agree on prices, and she says, so they're going to give me 70 crowns an hour, 3 times a week. And I would, but she says, "Chris, you come for lunch. You come for lunch, and then you teach him. You get the 70 crowns. And Sunday, no teach, but come to dinner."
That's a good deal.
She would just make these amazing meals, and she would just always look at me like, "I've kept him alive for another day, but I don't know. I don't know how long he's going to be able to go." But I do not think I ever had the same thing to eat in that lady's house. And that was what I was teaching 3 days a week, and then going just to basically be a leech on Sundays. And so 4 meals a week for a half year, and never had the same thing.
That's pretty cool. That's a good experience too. I like that.
Oh yeah, great people. And they have a thing called Sugar Day.
Oh, nice.
And Sugar Day is the happiest day of the year, but for the week or whatever it was, but everything was sweet in some way, but it wasn't like chocolate syrup sweet. It might be some kind of like a crepe with powdered sugar and apricot jam.
Nice.
It was delicious.
Now, you also taught a student named Magdalena. Can you talk about her for a bit?
Yeah, Magdalena was one of the students I had at the state school. So she was part of my job, if you will. And by the way, state language school is Statni Yazykova Skola. I just wanted to say that.
I like it.
And she had multiple sclerosis, and it was reasonably advanced. And my impression was that she was in school more or less to have some social outlets. Her husband was not the nicest guy in the world, and the two boys were sort of at an age where they were becoming a bit difficult to control. I don't think they were bad. I think they were boys of a certain age, and it was she couldn't deal with them properly and was getting no help. So she asked if I would come over and give her private lessons as well. She spoke fairly good German, and I speak fairly bad German. And so when we had trouble and the Slovak and the English wouldn't work, we could always fall back on German and kind of figure things out. But I was doing a lesson with her one time, and she says, "Please, my Schwester, my sister, she moved to Frankfurt, and she was murdered there." And I, think I know everything, I guess, and wanted to have this teachable moment, thinking that she meant died and she said murdered and didn't understand the difference. And so I said, "Well, you mean she died? You don't mean she was murdered?" And she, "Oh, no, please, no. Man come from next door and drag her to basement, and he cut off her halava head." I was like, "Yep, she was murdered."
God, what a macabre story, but funny anyway.
The student has become the teacher.
Yeah. You talk a lot about Slovakian food in the book, and you mentioned also, I think, that fried cheese seemed to be a national food. Can you talk a little bit about the Slovakian food and some of the things you ate there?
Sure. They had, it was, in a way, it was a standard Central European diet.
Yeah.
Without access to a lot of things you might take for granted, say in Germany. Vegetables, for instance, were whatever was in season, and nothing was being shipped in. So anyway, fried pork, big deal. So I've always been a fan of schnitzel. I think it's a great concept. And so you had that. There were tons of potatoes. There were a lot of root vegetables. We have like cheese sticks over here, something like that. But they actually had a sheep's cheese, and they would just take a gigantic square of it and bread it and fry it. And that was an entree, which to me, talk about something whose time had come. I mean, that was just amazing. And it goes great with about 7 or 8 beers.
Yeah.
And so that was really good. Viprajani sear, and then the mushrooms, they did a light batter with that. But instead of where usually when I see a fried mushroom in a restaurant, it's a whole shroom.
Yeah.
They would slice them up and then fry them.
Huh.
And so you get more batter.
Which is not bad.
So that's a positive thing. I came back with a cholesterol level of like 6 million. but there were not a lot of Southerners on this adventure. The group was Education for Democracy. It was actually based out of the University of South Alabama, but I was
Mhm.
just kind of shocked when I called that number and got my home state. But most people were from the North or the West, and apparently they eat a lot of salads in the North and the West,
Yeah.
and they were just not happy campers. And we'd go out drinking, and people would be like, how do they eat all this stuff? And I was like, I'll eat yours.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. But part of being Southern is no matter how cultured you may become in your life, you still have a love of all meats fried like chicken.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I mean, I'm from California. I like my salad, but I like my fried food too. So can't eat too much anymore, but it's quite wonderful. You,
As we sit here talking in my sixth decade, I have had to taper off a little bit.
me too. Unfortunately. You said too that I thought this was hilarious, is that their contribution to the world was tartar sauce.
Yeah. Every time you would go out, they'd be like, Chris, you know tartar sauce? Like, I think I do. And like, was invented in Slovakia, is different here than any other place. And
I love it.
It was just one of these things, I don't even know if it's true, but who necessarily cares?
Yeah. You really can't fact check that one.
But I say give it to them. I mean, the food was good, the beer was cold, and they were proud. So, and by the way, they beat us in hockey last night.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, 3-2, Slovakia over the United States.
I would like to have seen that. That sucks. I wish I hate to have missed that. That's kind of cool. I like hockey, so that's kind of neat. You mentioned pizza too in the book quite a bit and how it's different over there. And it was a little bit weird sometimes. What was it like? What was your experience with that?
I would be interested to know if this has changed, because I have a feeling with everything getting sort of westernized by this point, they've figured it out. But we had there was one pizza place at the time, and it was called Pizzeria Alba, and so we'd go there a couple of times a week, and they didn't have the concept of tomato sauce. It just didn't exist. I don't mean that restaurant. I mean the nation of Slovakia did not know what tomato sauce was, and so
Yeah.
it was a dry pizza. And for 3 crowns extra, they would bring you a little container of ketchup that you could, pour over the pizza, which seemed like an odd concept to me.
It's weird. And I think somebody had like a fried egg on one once. That was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
there's a Pizza Ovum was the name of it. And Merrill, we were getting ready to go to, I think Budapest maybe. And we had been to a name day party, and we were both hammered, is the only thing you can say. And so anyway, I got a pizza with ham, slanina, and he's I'm gonna have this pizza ovum, and they bring it out, and there's this egg cracked in the center of the
My
pizza.
God.
And huh? Okay.
I can cut that. That's good.
So anyway, but he ate the whole thing, so I guess he liked it. But it was funny, just to tack on to that, and it just, I think this shows you how much freedom we had during this time. We were supposed to be going to Krakow, and for some reason that was always a challenge to get to. And I think we got there on our 4th attempt. And let's see, we got to the train station this time 2 minutes late. And we looked at each other, and Meryl said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I looked at the board, and there was a train leaving for Budapest in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've never been to Budapest. And so I said, "Well, neither have I." And we bought the tickets, and I got out the Let's Go guidebook from the Harvard students produce. And on the train ride overnight, we figured out what we were going to do in Budapest.
Nice.
So, definitely, it's one of these experiences I think everybody should have, because you're never going to be that free again.
Yeah.
Oddly enough,
go ahead.
No matter how much money you make, I went over there with $300 and making $100 a month, and the little side hustle here and there. I traveled all over Eastern Europe, so just a great opportunity.
Yeah, I know that traveling over there is a lot easier with like rail passes and stuff. You can get around a lot easier than we do in America. Now, you had one experience that I really liked in chapter 22, where you talked about Coca-Cola and how you said, you understood what must be like to be living under communism, and your friend Maja kind of corrected you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I had to wait in line for a Coke. And Americans are not line waiters. Line waiters. We don't care for that.
No.
And in Slovakia, you had to wait in line twice, because you had to wait in line outside the store until someone came out, and then they would hand you a cart. And then you would go through and get what you need and get in line to pay. So that was really bizarre to me. And it may have just been a practical thing. These were tiny grocery stores.
Yeah.
And so it may have just been, a little control system. But, it's 15 degrees outside, and you're standing in line with this empty cart. And meanwhile, all you want is a Coca-Cola. And so you just spent 30 minutes to get a 12-ounce can of Coke. And so I'm talking to Maya, and thought I was saying something intelligent. That's when I always end up in trouble. And
me too.
Said, I think I understand kind of what you people were going through for all these, this half century of communism, because, my life was ruined because I had to wait 30 minutes for a Coke and a smile. And she just, she got mad. And her face just kind of went dark, and she said, communism. Well, and I'm not even going to do the accent because this is serious. Communism was waking up at 6 a.m. To a knock at the door, and it's your neighbor telling you that the grocery store has apples, and you go to the grocery store with a bag, and you spend the whole morning waiting there. And if you're lucky, you get an apple for every member of your family. And
I like
so
that.
It was a bad time.
Yeah, it gives a good idea of what it was like.
Yeah, but her family had resisted the government when the communists were coming to power, and as punishment, they had been lawyers, I believe that's right, but I know she had wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And the state would not let her go to law school. They were magnanimous, though, and said they would at least allow her to go be a teacher, which is something she had never wanted to be. Now, the irony of that, it shows you how no one truly appreciates teachers, because you can't go be a lawyer, but you can mold young minds.
Yeah. They picked the worst option.
So, and she was an excellent teacher. She was so good with the students, but she wasn't really in love with the profession all that much. And it just wasn't what she had dreamed of doing.
Now, have you been back to Slovakia? And also, what did you miss about Slovakia since in the time period that you had not been there?
Well, I went back in 94 and 95 for the summer. And Merrill was still living there. And he ended up marrying a Slovak. And they live in Colorado now. And so I had a free place to crash. Thank you, Merrill. And then in 96, I went back to teach for a half year again. And in 2007, I got a fellowship with the Goethe Institute. And so I was doing stuff in Germany for 2 weeks. And then I took a backpack as well and backpacked in Eastern Europe and actually got to go back to Banska Bystrica. Spent 2 or 3 days there. And that was in 2007. That was my last visit.
Had it changed anything at all, or have you kept in touch with anybody that's still there and talked about how much it's changed at all?
I almost felt like the most visible changes happened between 93 and 96.
Yeah.
Because the very evil, corrupt leader of the country at the time, Vladimir Mečiar, it's always a Vladimir, have you noticed?
Yeah.
And
it does not portend well when somebody's named that.
Well, he may have been corrupt, but he was from Banska Bystrica. And so he was pumping money into his home region. And so all of those buildings, those medieval buildings, were just being brought back to their glory.
Oh, nice.
And so that was really good. And, and things have just gotten that much, better in 2007. But I think that was the biggest change was over that 3-year time period.
Have you thought about going back again? Any desire to go back now?
Well, this darn COVID thing is
that's a good point. Yeah.
My wife really wants to go.
Yeah.
But I think she feels like she's had to listen to this stuff for 11 years. And so she should at least get to see the country.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And so I know we're eventually going to get there, but things have got to, I don't really fear COVID at this point. I mean, they keep jabbing things in the side of my arm, so I figure I'm going to live.
Yeah.
What I do fear is getting over there and something going wrong and them telling me, well, you're going to have to spend 2 weeks in a hotel quarantining.
Yeah.
And now I've spent a small fortune on a hotel but didn't get to see anything. So
yeah,
I'd like all the various protocols to get sorted out, and then I'll start going again. But yeah, I'd like to go back. And I think you may have asked this, and if you didn't, I think it was an unasked question. When I went back in 2007, I ran into 1 or 2 students that I'd known, and we got to have a few beers together and catch up. I found Magdalena, and she was still alive, which kind of amazed me.
Yeah.
But I was walking through Lennon Park, by the way, they dropped Lennon. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I was walking through Park, because there are no definite or indefinite articles, so it's not even the park. And she lived across from it, and I saw a lady on crutches just really struggling, and I recognized her. And so I got to see her. I left a business card in Maya's door, and she had been out of town, but she emailed me after that.
Nice.
So everybody's rocking right along in the double B.
So to that tune, do you think you're going to write a sequel, a follow-up to Moon over Sasova?
It's possible, because I mean there were subsequent travels, so there's material there, and I've got the journals, I've got the photo albums, and I've even got letters people sent me, and in some cases letters I sent that people gave back to me. So the second trip was, it doesn't have all the romance, I think, of the original trip. Whenever you do something for a second time, it's not as good as the first, as a rule.
Yeah.
And if I do it, I'm almost focused more on the pure travel of it as opposed to uh, any kind of teaching aspect. But I went a lot that summer in particular. So I got there 2 months before the school year started. So the working title is From Vilnius to Dubrovnik.
I like
But
that.
pretty much I did almost the north of Europe down to the south. And so there are cool stories to be told.
I hope you do write that, because I really found this to be an engaging book, and I do recommend my listeners to please seek this book out. It's really wonderful, and it's a really fun read. I found it just really delightful all the way through.
Well, thank you.
Chris, I want to thank you for being on the program. I hope we get to have you back on again sometime. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you.
Okay, well, I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
That was my conversation with author Christopher Shaffer regarding his book, Moon over Sasova. I had a great time talking to Christopher, and I hope he comes back on the show again. I also hope to get to see a sequel to the book, as this one was so entertaining. Do get a chance to get a copy of it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You won't regret it. It's a great book. Now, coming on Friday, we're going to have John Birdsall, who I'm sure you've heard of, talking about his James Beard biography, The Man Who Ate Too Much. It's a great book and very poignant, got a lot of good insight on the life of James Beard and other luminaries. I hope that you join us on Friday to talk to John. He was a great conversationalist, and I really enjoyed getting to hear his perspectives. And that'll be on Friday. Until then, happy cooking.